And now it's time for This Week in Come Follow Me.
This is the back of the chapel version. This is the back of the chapel
That's
podcast.
right. Yeah.
This is you came in with your kids,
Right.
after sacrament. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're at the back of the chapel. We're giving you last week's lessons. That's what we're all about.
exactly.
So I'll go off of some of my insights from last week first, and then we'll kick it over to you if you have any. So last week was kind of interesting because we were talking a lot about the actual ordinances of like the sacrament, the purpose of the sacrament, and things like that. And so I want to dig into a little bit of some of the symbolism that may be missed in kind of a modern take that I absolutely didn't know when I was a kid being raised in the church, but that I learned later that kind of gave me some new perspective. So in the ancient Israelite temple traditions, whenever there was whenever somebody needed to make a sacrifice or like an atonement or for a sacrifice for sins or a cleansing or something like that, so they would bring an unblemished lamb to the priest, and the priest was someone who was from the tribe of Levi, and so they were given this authority to sacrifice this lamb. And so what they would do is they would kill this lamb, and then they would put the body of the lamb, they would break it on the altar. And the altar was actually like a big barbecue in the courtyard of the temple. And so there was a fire in this barbecue. It would actually cook the meat, and then they would sprinkle the blood over the meat. And so after that, they would take this meat and they would break it, give it to the temple patron, and they would eat it themselves. And so there's a ton of symbolism in there. So contrast that experience with bread and water, right? So there's a sacrifice. There's kind of an idea of an altar that we have in our chapel that is where that body and the blood is placed, and where the fires of the Holy Ghost can come down and bless and sanctify that as it is, and then it is passed out to share a meal with everybody in the congregation. And one of the things that is interesting about the Middle East is one of the customs that they have is if you are eating with somebody, sharing a meal with someone, it actually sends a sign to everybody else who can see that you are one with that person. So they will not eat with you if you are not one with them. And so there is just a lot of symbolism going on there. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I did want to kind of call that out. That might be able to help you shift your mentality as you're partaking the sacrament to focus on the idea that this is an ancient tradition. This isn't just something that some kooky guy cribbed from other religions and just kind of hodgepodge together. This has ancient roots and it has deep symbolism in it. And that can be very powerful. And those symbols can help guide you into a more meaningful worship.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we fail to connect the dots sometimes with sacrament to realize that we're doing it. It's a community act too, right? Like you said, it's like sharing a meal with your entire ward. And it's important to realize that you are partaking in the atonement with the people around you.
Yeah, in Spanish, they call it La Santa Cena, which basically means the Holy Supper.
Yeah. And like you said, sharing a meal with someone is deeply intimate, right? It's a very personal experience. So to share a meal with those around you to help come together as saints should be something that it's something that we take for granted, that we shouldn't, because this now more than ever we should be gathering as saints and having each other's backs when we are coming into the world and sharing what we believe. So I think that's a great perspective.
100%. Yeah. Awesome. Well, did you have anything?
I mean, I have a couple cultural complaints. I don't know why we don't see the value of having the paper cups and the tap water and the Wonder Bread. Make sacrament a spiritual experience by using good bread and clean water.
I tell you what, in my last ward, we had a couple that owned a couple great harvest bakeries, and they were like, "We've got the bread," and it was some of the most delicious bread, and it actually elevated the sacrament experience. It was like, wow, this is actually really good. Because you actually looked forward to it at that point.
There's so she volunteered and she makes the bread for our ward. And
Yeah.
the first week we we switched over to her bread. There had several people came up and she's like, I haven't felt the spirit that strong in a long time. It's like, yeah, it's good bread, right?
Yeah.
But then another cultural point is we subsequently got a complaint from one of the parents of one of the priests saying that the crust was too hard to tear, and if we could make different bread, that would be that would be nice.
Oh,
Like, I'm
darn.
sorry if your hands aren't strong enough to tear the sourdough bread that someone
Okay, that is
painstakingly
a
made
complaint
for.
that can only happen in 2024. You know, it's like,
That's
oh
so
my
weak.
word. Like what a postmodern complaint to have.
Yeah, like you just, I want to send one of those gripper,
Oh yeah.
strengtheners. It's like,
It's
here,
just like,
buddy, if
yeah.
you can't tear your own bread, like we have a problem. So, but no, I share the sentiments that you do. That the sacrament is probably one of the most least understood like ceremonies and rituals that we partake in. And overall, the Old Testament is just something that we don't study nearly as deeply as we should.
Well, one thing to
Right.
consider is that the Old Testament, so that sacrifice was made in the temple. They were technically in the temple when they made it. And so one thing and the brethren have announced this in leadership trainings is like, consider the chapel as an ordinance room and treat it respectively. Okay. So it's like, so look at your Sabbath experience, your sacrament experience as basically a temple experience that you have every week. And that's something that's super powerful, because it's like, yeah, that is a
Oh
weekly
yeah.
ordinance that you can have. And technically it is an ordinance room, similar to like all the other ordinances outside of baptism are happening in the temple. And so that can be pretty powerful as well. All right, with that being said, I guess we'll see everybody next time. I'm Hayden Holm, and this is Salty Saints.